bummer, there's an acrylic cone in here. I'm just really thrilled and a little surprised with how well this is going. And this is something I've heard people talk about, but I always thought it was a little bit of like knit lore. I just wanted a win, and this has really been quite the win. All progress was completely stunted. Don't be mad at me for casting on something new.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I have so much to tell you about. I have a new finished object. I have an update on a stubborn WIP, two stubborn WIPs really, and I have a new cast on, a little guilty pleasure in there, as well as a bunch of yarn and goodies to talk to you about. Since I didn't film a podcast last week, I've just managed to get so much done in quite a little bit of time. And so I'm really happy to have the chance to sit here and think through all of my thoughts today. Before I get into it, I do just want to let you know, if you haven't seen it already, in lieu of a normal podcast episode last Saturday, I did put my least worn knits video out, and I want to say thank you so much to those of you who have watched it. I think that there's something so valuable about going through and really nitpicking your finished projects so that you can learn from the mistakes and just the things that you're not loving so much. So if you haven't seen that video already, I would definitely recommend that you go check it out. And I think with that out of the way, we should go ahead and dive on in. Also, so sorry, it's spring. If you hear things, everyone decided it was time to bust out their weed whacker at this very moment. So I'm trying to ignore that today. I'm hoping that you can't hear it. Let's start by talking about my finished object, which was the test knit I had done for Joyanne from Toke's Knits. This is the Simi Sweater. It is a top-down drop shoulder V-neck, which features the 2x2 ribbing. And this was Joyanne's first sweater design. For the test knit, the yarn was sponsored by Onling, which was a new to me yarn brand, and I was really eager to check it out. So the yarn is Onling number 1, which is a merino angora blend, and the colorway that I chose is called mustard. I knit mine in the size extra large, and the body of this sweater was knit up on 4mm needles, and then all of the ribs, cuff, the hems, all of that stuff, that was done on 3.5mm needles. So I just finished this the other day. As I'm sitting here filming, I had actually posted some finished object photos over on Instagram yesterday, and you guys are loving this sweater, which is great because I do too. The finished fabric is the softest thing I have ever made. I have it right now next to skin, and I have a little more sunburn. And it's totally comfy sitting on my skin. I think if you're very sensitive to that more prickly feeling, you might find that it's a little bit itchy, but with a layer just on those more sensitive areas, I can't see it being a problem at all on my arms and everything like this. It's so cozy, so comfy, extremely lightweight. I'm going to put on the screen here just how much the finished garment weighs, but it's extremely lightweight and just like floaty. It kind of just hovers over the body and creates the most wonderful spring transitional layering piece. Now, the only thing that's going to be different about mine versus the original design is the rate at which I had done the decreases on my sleeves. I wound up having a row gauge issue, which I'll have to check what actually happened there, because I had done my gauge swatch and I matched gauge on that. And then once I got into making this, it became kind of clear at some point that my gauge just didn't look the same anymore. And then that was very evident when I went to pick up my stitches around the sleeves. And I wound up having to pick up like significantly more than the pattern stated. And so I spoke with Joyanne and I just made sure it was okay that I continued on that route, because had I tried to force the number that she suggested in the pattern, I would have had a really awkwardly cinched armhole. So I picked up at the rate that she states in the pattern, and then I just shifted my decrease rate to make sure that in the end I wound up with the same amount of stitches that she recommends. Now, once I got to that point and I tried this on, I did feel like my sleeves were going to be just the littlest bit too short still. So I did wind up knitting about 1.5 inches without decreases, just to make my sleeves a little bit longer before finishing them off with that 2x2 ribbing. And other than that, everything that you see is knit 100% to pattern. I believe that this pattern is an absolute library essential. And the reason I say that is because while looking at this is your very basic drop shoulder V-neck sweater. There's really no bells and whistles, and yet there are in all of the details. And what's nice about that is that the pattern serves you on a platter every little extra that you might want in a basic sweater. So that being the perfect 2x2 V-neck with that center double decrease, the short rows to shape the top of the back, additional German short rows to drop the back of the sweater to have more of that relaxed fit, the split hem with that really great slip stitch edge, as well as all of the instructions you need to rearrange your 2x2 rib stitches in order to complete an Italian tubular bind off. What I think is great is if you knit this completely according to pattern, you're going to wind up with this exact result, a basic sweater with not so basic details. But then once you've made it, you can kind of look at all of those little finishing touches and details as options. And so then the next time you are looking for a basic sweater, you might say, I actually don't want a split hem, so I'll just continue to knit my ribbing in the round. And instead of having to add that to a sweater, you could just omit the instructions that are there. Or I don't really need the back to be longer than the front. So instead of reversing that and saying I have this sweater that already has a level hem in the front and the back, I have to figure out how to make that back longer, you can instead have the written instructions for the more complicated option, but then knit it without those German short rows to drop the back. I also think it would be really simple to swap out all of the finishes for 1x1 rib. And so for me, what I've learned from this sweater is that I will continue to look for those simple, basic, staple pieces with all of the bells and whistles. And therefore, I always have that written down, the hardest parts, but then I can always omit those things and swap them out for something a little more simple and that I maybe don't need completely written out for me. And that's how I will consider which pattern to choose when I'm looking for those basic patterns. I'm blown away with just Joyanne's writing style in this. The pattern is very concise and clear to the point while still providing all the information that you need. I think that whether you're a beginner looking to make a really solid first piece that shows you all these different techniques, or if you're a more experienced knitter who really values the little details in a pattern, this is one that's just for everybody. She did such a great job. The yarn choice was amazing, but I would have so much fun playing with other yarns for this sweater. And I think that the fit ultimately is this just fun, relaxed, cozy, delightful fit. I did follow the pattern for the length of everything, and somehow, again, with my row gauge issue that I'm learning about now, mine wound up being a little bit more cropped, but it's actually the exact length that I've been hoping for in a sweater because I really only wear high-waisted jeans, and I found that a lot of my other basic sweaters, I've knit them more oversized and really long, and wearing them with the high-waisted jeans, there's just a little bit of a disconnect, and sometimes there's even too much sweater to tuck. So I love the length of this one, and especially with the split hem, I can wear it with my jeans and just look relaxed and kind of casual and cozy without it looking too sloppy. So that also means that for me, this is ticking off a really huge box in my 2025 knitting plans, which is to create more elevated basics. And I think that this is the perfect elevated basic between the fabric and the finishes. It just really is hitting that void in my wardrobe, and I'm so happy about it. Now, the one thing that I wanted to tell you about as far as the row gauge issue that I had is I think that sorry, there's like a little piece of lint stuck in it. I think that you can actually visibly see that my sleeves were knit at a crazy more dense gauge than the body of the sweater. And this is something I've heard people talk about, but I always thought it was a little bit of like knit lore that when you're working on a smaller circumference, your gauge can change. Similarly to working flat can change your gauge from in the round. And I've really never experienced huge discrepancies enough that it's worth it to kind of go out of my way to mitigate those things until this sweater. I don't know what happened with the sleeves of this one, but I feel like my gauge on the sleeves just really is way more dense, even though it was a 4mm needle, just like the rest of the body. And so the next time I'm knitting a stockinette sweater, I think I will up my needle size on the sleeves to see if I can visually tell the difference and hopefully avoid the little bit of a row gauge issue that I had in this one. Though it was a non-issue, I was able to figure it out, and in the end, I'm thrilled with the finished result. Now, I feel like it's been so long since I had a finished object that I actually forgot to do my little finished object spiel rundown. So I'm going to film that at the end of the podcast today, and I'll insert the clip right here for you to see. All right, let me give you the full project breakdown for the Simi Sweater here. So it is the Simi Sweater by Toques Knits. Now that this pattern is live on Ravelry, it is $8 to purchase there. It was not in my library previously as it was gifted for the test knit itself. The yarn that I used is Onling number 1 in the colorway Mustard. That was not in stash, and it was in fact gifted for all of the pattern testers. If I were to purchase this yarn at full price, this is going to cost about $18.50 per ball as it was gifted. I, of course, did not pay for the yarn at all. That being said, I did use a total of 7 balls of this yarn. It actually comes in weighing exactly 350 grams, and that is for the size 2XL. Which means that had I purchased the yarn at full price, this sweater would cost a total of $129.50. But for me, it was free. And so that just means that had I paid for everything full price, the pattern plus the yarn, the total for this one would be $137.50. And because I test knit it with the yarn sponsored for the test knit, my total is $0. And that is for a project that was all my needles for a total of 38 days. Something that I want to note really quickly on the cost of this yarn is that I would definitely say that this is a good alternative to a fingering weight plus mohair, as most silk mohairs I think run you about $12 to $16 a ball, plus then the wool that you're going to hold with it. If you can find this yarn on sale, which I haven't seen this particular one go on sale on the Onling website yet, but other of their yarns have. I think that it's a really great option as you get that little bit of a mohair halo fuzz, but you don't have to buy 2 yarns and you don't have to hold 2 strands together throughout the process. So I would consider the price as that sort of like upcharge in lieu of buying 2 yarns. And so if you can find it on sale and you like the look of it and everything, I would say jump on it most definitely. And that is my Simi Sweater by Toaks Knits, and it was on the needles for a total of 38 days. Moving on to some WIPs. I'm trying to figure out if I should tell you about my 2 WIP pickles I wound up in this past couple of weeks or the new cast on that I had. And I think I'm going to start with one that you've seen before. So let me tell you a little bit about the Stitches sweater by Veronica Lindberg Kutova Kika, which I am knitting out of various thrifted and gifted by my aunt wool yarns so that I can actually felt this into a sort of quarter zip snap sweatshirt situation. I will put her onto Helena the Hanga so that you guys can see where we're at. Here she is. I feel like you probably can't even tell from here the progress that I made over the last couple of weeks. And that's because not a lot was made, and yet all progress was completely stunted. So I'm knitting this really off gauge from the original design. I'm using a 6.5 millimeter needle to knit this up, and I'm also knitting it in a larger size, which is the 4XL, so that when I felt it and it shrinks down, it should fit me like a nice oversized sweatshirt. And I figured all of that out by knitting up a swatch and felting that. So I was really excited to finally get to the point with this where I was splitting for the sleeves, and I basically hunkered down shortly after filming the last podcast and was like, all right, let's do it. Let's wrap this sweater up. And instantly, that wasn't going to happen. I went to split for the sleeves. So you knit across the row, however many stitches she says in the pattern. You move your sleeve stitches onto some try-it-on tubing. I did that, cast on new stitches for under the arm, you know, the whole bit, your typical kind of top down, this is a circular yoke, splitting for the sleeves moment. And I followed all of these instructions, and then I got to the end and she had said knit to the beginning of round X amount of stitches. And when I knit that amount of stitches, I still had quite a few stitches left on the needle. So I assumed that somewhere along the way I had miscounted. I went back and I counted all of the stitches that I had in that first half of the back, the sleeve, the front, the other sleeve, and then how many were remaining on the back. And it matched up with the amount of stitches that she had told me to knit. So then I went back another step and checked how many stitches I was supposed to have had on my needles at this point, thinking maybe I messed something up before this and didn't decrease or increase too many times. And so that's where these extra stitches are coming from. But when I looked back at that, I had that amount of stitches on my needles. So then I went to Ravelry because I figured, you know, Veronica Lindberg is a huge designer, and I've seen so many people knit this sweater. Obviously, this would have been addressed at some point had they come across this issue in the pattern. And so I went onto Ravelry and I went to filter projects by size, and I learned that as far as I could tell on Ravelry, no one has knit the 4XL, and I also don't think anyone's knit the 5XL, which means that I don't believe these 2 sizes have been tested, and therefore I actually think that there is an error in the pattern when it comes to the amount of stitches that you are to divide into the front, back, and sleeves. So I looked through the pattern again and I found that there was a whole issue in the math. Like the way that the pattern was written, I could just tell without knitting it that these numbers did not add up to the random numbers that I was given for this split. And so I emailed the support email that's included in the pattern. And as of today, that was, I think, over a week ago now. And it said allow for 5 to 7 business days, I think. But I haven't received anything back yet. And I have to say that this kind of burst my bubble. When you buy a pattern and you find a mistake, it's always really frustrating. But I think it's especially so when it's a designer who this is their full-time job. Um, and I've seen this simple little note in other designers' patterns on Ravelry that I think would have changed my perspective on the whole situation. And I'm definitely going to communicate that to Veronica's people who handle these things whenever I can get in touch with them, which is when you look at a Ravelry page for a pattern and it says this pattern has been tested except for the sizes, X and Y. And so if you plan to knit those sizes and would like to provide some feedback, then we'll give you this pattern for free or just something along those lines. Literally just the concept of there being a heads up, the size you're about to knit has not been test knit before. And so you kind of go up with your radar, on looking for those mistakes or at least understanding when they arise that it's simply that you're the first person knitting it in that size. So I was really bummed to figure this out. I'm still bummed that I haven't heard back, and I will reach out again, hoping to get some clarity on the issue. And then if I still don't hear back, of course, I'll go through and try to figure out how many stitches I'm supposed to have in each section. It's just a little bit tricky because I'm really depending on the numbers in the pattern and the math that I had done in my swatch to wind up with the size that I need, since this isn't just like, oh, let me try it on and see if this fits type situation. Like, it's definitely not going to fit. So a little bit bummed here. I definitely feel like I hit a wall with this project just when I was really in the swing of things. I finished all of the zigzags in the color work and everything. And so it's been sitting ever since. So naturally, when I found some sale yarn at Joann's and this was at a standstill, I felt like I deserved a new cast on. And something that felt particularly seasonally appropriate. And it just so happens that it was going to be another Kuchova Kika design. So let me swap it out from this sweater to my new cast on, which is the Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindberg. And I am knitting it out of the K&C Knit and Crochet brand Essential Cotton that is sold at Joann's, or was sold at Joann's, in the colorway Buttercup. Here it is. Yes. I basically shut out everything else that I had on my needles and decided to work on this exclusively since the day that I cast it on, in between finishing up the sleeves on this Simi sweater. So this guy's been on my needles for 9 days today. And if you know anything about the Salty Days sweater, you know that it's typically knit in wool. It's actually, I think, originally designed in wool plus mohair. But from the moment that I first saw this sweater, I really felt like it deserved to be a summer beachy piece. Then in one of my recent podcasts, I had worn a sweater that I had crocheted using the KNC Essential Cotton, and I was just reminded how much I loved the feel of that sweater. It's very holey and beachy, and the cotton is super, super soft. And throughout the summer, I tend to grab that and just chuck it on over top of whatever tank top I was wearing that day as the night gets a little bit chillier. And I really felt like I should have a knit kind of alternative version. So I was in Joann's and I had seen this cotton in the buttercup color and I couldn't resist. There was exactly enough there for me to make a sweater in my size. And I knew that I had this pattern in my library, which meant that this whole project does support my 2025 Knitting from the Vault plans, which is the year-long knit-along that we're doing. Just encouraging you to use what you have, yarn, patterns, books, you name it. If you have it and you can make it work for a project, then this is the knit-along, just to push you a little bit to get those things done and out of the vault. So I thought that this would be a really fun pair. I wasn't totally sure. I just went in and cast on without gauge swatching, and I've been thrilled with how it's going. Now, because of this fiber choice and change, I've been making a few modifications. Let's just start out by saying that originally I cast on for the 2XL on 5mm needles as the pattern suggests, and I had made it through the increases along the back. And basically, as you're knitting this drop shoulder sweater, that increase is making this wider and wider. And when I got to the end and measured it, unblocked on anything, and then I measured the width of my biggest sweater, it was pretty significantly larger. So from there, I ripped back so that the back panel would line up with the size extra large, which was a nice easy fix because I didn't have to do anything different. I literally just had to rip out as many increases as there were different between the extra large and 2XL. So from then on, I have been knitting this fully in the size extra large. You start with this whole back panel situation, and then you go into the really fun lace work. And if you've been here for a little bit, you know that lace and I have not necessarily gotten along in my knitting journey. It's been the toughest thing for me to enjoy making and to just get done right. So back when I was talking about a project that I had with lace that was really giving me a hard time, a lot of people had suggested this pattern, and that was when I wound up picking it up. And I really do believe that if you are someone who hasn't knit lace or you're just not really comfortable with it, this is the pattern for you. The really fun part is that once you get to this little lacework section, it's so isolated and it's such a confined amount of rows. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel the whole time, and the repeat is always the same, whereas the last lace project that I had worked on, it sort of bricklayed as you went, which meant that there was just so much more to keep track of. If you wanted to with this one, you could definitely put in a stitch marker at the end of each repeat so that it repeats properly. But it just was really simple and fun to do. And then when it was done, it was a relief because it didn't feel like I was stuck in that for the longest time. I love the little eyelet rows with just the yarn over knit two together, a very typical kind of lacy detail. And the way that then the whole thing is a little bit geometric because it is in these stripes. I just think that that's so fun. So you start with the back, the trapezoid shape, you get through the first little lace section, at which point you come in and you pick up for the front, and in the front panel is where you work this fun little lace eyelet detail. You then, of course, work your way down with that same lace motif going across the front. And then once everything is joined in the round, you work the really beautiful cable motif and then back to the eyelet row and back to the lace again. So that all I did according to pattern, again in the size extra large. After that, though, I was trying to figure out what other changes I would have to make my yarn choice make sense with like the whole vibe of this sweater. So I felt like for the beachy sweater that I was going for, the folded over ribbed collar probably wasn't going to work. And so I just kind of went off the cuff. And actually, after speaking with a knitting friend, Chelsea, who was working on a project that has a rolled stockinette neckline, I was like, man, I've always wanted to try doing that. And we thought it would look really cute in this garment. But I felt like I still needed to really build up the neckline. And I don't know why the idea of the ribbing just was still going to kind of kill the vibe of the beach vibes over here for me. So what I wound up doing, and I'm so thrilled with, is I used the Knit Two Together yarn over eyelet lace motif as the first part of the collar. So I picked up the stitches recommended in the pattern. I knit around once. Then I knit the little lace eyelet motif, at which point I did a single row of knit purl just so that it had like a little structure. And then I knit the remaining rows in stockinette. And basically, to determine how many rows tall I wanted the collar, I just referenced what was already written for the collar that was intended to be folded in half. So if that said 20 rows, I knit 10, knowing I would just need half that amount to get the height I wanted without having to fold this over. I think in total it's like 13 rows or something like that. But I just knew however many rows I had left, I did in the stockinette. And then I did a regular standard bind off with a little bit of a bigger needle to make sure it wouldn't be too tight. And I had done the first part of the collar on a 4.5 millimeter needle. And then once I got to the rib and then the stockinette, I used a 3 millimeter needle. So I'm really just so pleased with the way that turned out. And from there, I was able to decide that I wanted a split hem on this, not too dissimilar to the fit of this sweater. I wanted something that wouldn't cinch in at all, and I didn't want mine to be nearly as long as hers. Her torso is on the Salty Days sweater. So I just chose to disregard the instructions after the eyelet detail after the second lace motif. So I knit up to there, and then I just went ahead and split for the front and the back with equal amount of stitches. And I started working the 2x1, 1x2 ribbing that you see at the top of the sweater, and figure that was ribbing enough for the hem. And after knitting like what looked like enough, I just finished it off with an I-cord bind off, and I just did that part this morning. I have yet to do the back, and then this thing needs sleeves, but I do want to show you what it looks like on, so I'll be sure to include some B-roll in it. I think it's the most darling thing, and if I can, this is a long shot, but I think it would be really fun to wear to Easter. I think it's possible if I just steam block it, which as cotton, it would respond really well to. But I'm also kind of eyeing this and wondering if I should just do an I-cord or even the same kind of eyelet and then rolled hem detail around the arms and just wear it as a vest. I don't know. I'm just really thrilled and a little surprised with how well this is going. And that's good because the whole reason I cast this on was to have a little more instant gratification when the Stitches sweater hit a wall, and then so did another WIP. And obviously I have my Granada that I just haven't had the strength to work on with all of the sort of fixes that needs. So I just wanted a win, and this has really been quite the win. I also I remember discussing this butter yellow color last spring, and it became just so trendy last year. And everything that I was seeing when I held it up to me, I felt like it was not a good color for me. But this one, this color, I don't know how well it translates on camera, but I find this to be a little bit more of like a country crock yellow than a butter yellow, in that it has like a drop of red in it. It just has that littlest bit of an orange undertone versus that super cool yellow. And so I feel like it's a way more complimentary color for me, especially if I have a little bit of a tan, which all the more reason to have this as a summer sweater, something that I literally just chuck on summer evenings. I'm really thrilled with it. I would love to try and get it done for Easter. I don't know if it's possible, but keep your fingers crossed for me. Maybe I can figure it out, because obviously it's gone by super quickly so far on those 5mm needles. It's actually been flying. So yeah. Don't be mad at me for casting on something new. I'm just following the joy, which is another 2025 knitting plan of mine. Yeah, that is my Salty Days sweater by Veronica Lindbergh on my needles for 9 days today. Okay, now the last project I'm going to talk to you about today is the other WIP that hit a little standstill after we spoke last, and that's the second test knit that I unnecessarily signed on for, the Pearl Sweater by Magdalena Parker. It is a drop shoulder cable knit sweater, and the cables feature these really fun little pearl stitches that just make it look like pearl necklaces, absolutely like cascading down the body in the most gorgeous and glamorous way. I did show my WIP last week where I was at, so let me grab that so we could start there. Okay, so this is what I had to show you last week. Since then, I did go ahead and block it. So I had started this project on the Juniper Moon Farm Patagonia Organic Merino in the colorway Pearl. I thought that the name Pearl and the Pearl sweater, it was too good to be true. It was in my stash, so 2025 from the vault, and it felt like a really good choice until I started knitting mine and looking at the other test knitters options as well as Magdalena's. And I felt like even though this was on gauge, mine didn't look nearly as like plump and luscious as literally everyone else's. And I mentioned this last week, looking for just some ideas or what you guys all made of that. And someone commented and let me know that this yarn, being a 2-ply, it won't have the same roundness in the yarn itself as a yarn that has a 3-ply or more. And this is territory that I've never thought about before. So that little tidbit of information was the most eye-opening and mind-blowing thing ever. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate whoever commented that, and it just stuck with me. And I was like, maybe that's the issue. So I paused on this and I dug through my stash, and I actually found some yarn that I had been reserving for this Salty Days sweater. And I was reluctant to swatch with it because I really knew I wanted to make the Salty Days sweater in that yarn. Ultimately did. And then that was kind of what wound up leading me to when I saw that yellow cotton at Joann's. I was like, wait, I could just use this for the Salty Days. And then I have no guilt around using the other yarn for the pearl sweater, and everything works out in the end. So I swatched with a different yarn. I actually swatched with a couple of different yarns. The first part of this swatch was me holding the Patagonia Organic Merino Pearl along with a strand of Valley Yarns Alpaca Silk. And that's literally all just what you see up until this point. So I felt like while it did give my stitches that little bit more plumpness and definition, the other issue that I was having with the Patagonia yarn is that it's naturally a very heathered and sort of variation yarn wool, that it has specks of whites and grays and blacks and creams in there. And so by adding in the white alpaca silk, it really made for that much more heathering. And I think that just took away even more from the little pearl bumps in the cables. Plus, it didn't add quite the plumpness I had hoped it would. So then I swapped over to this yarn. And I think that you could just tell right off the bat here how much more defined these stitches look versus these ones. And that's what I continued working in. This is yarn that my friend had gifted me last year for my birthday. It was also a Joann's yarn. It was Eddie Bauer Wool Paca, and that's an 80% extra fine merino superwash and 20% alpaca. This colorway is bright white. It's a very true gray leaning white. And I cast on with that after starting the gauge swatch, and I figured, let me just pause and block this to make sure we're going in the right direction, since this one, stumped me. I wasn't expecting to hit that roadblock after gauge swatching with this yarn and everything. I went ahead and I blocked this, and it's just been hanging out on the blocking mats while I finished the Simi Sweater and everything. And I'm very happy to say that this yarn is going to work out absolutely wonderfully. It's on gauge. I will say that it's still not quite as plump as some of the other testers, but I'm very happy with the fabric that I'm getting. And I think it's much more defined, and I think it just looks a lot happier, this yarn and this fabric, versus this fabric with the Patagonia yarn. So I will be continuing the test knit using my Eddie Bauer Wool Paca, and I can do that because I no longer need this yarn for the Salty Days sweater. I'm going to use that cotton instead. And so this is a very happy update. It's just that this has been sitting on the blocking mats while I kind of rearranged things and got started on a different project for fun. But yeah, I think that we can all agree this is a much better choice. I also was a little bit concerned about the color of this one just kind of washing me out a little bit. And I still want to make a sweater out of this yarn. I just think that for this purpose, I love the bright white of it all. And I think it's going to be a really great basic white sweater that's not so basic, elevated basic to have in my wardrobe. So I will continue to update you on this sweater in the next podcast episode once I put in a little bit more time on it. And I think that's when I'll actually set a timeline of like when I started this, because I've really worked on it for a total of 2 days and it's just been blocking and swatching ever since. So I'm excited to just get back into like knitting on this. So that's the update on the Pearl Sweater by Magdalena Parker. It's a test knit. And thank you so much again to everyone who commented with your advice on how to handle this situation, because I was really upset that my initial plan just was not working out. And I'm so glad that I took the time to just shift over and change things up a little bit. So Pearl Sweater, Magdalena Parker, test knit. Okay, with the projects out of the way, I have to tell you I'm surrounded by an overwhelming amount of acquisitions, and I have reasons for that. First of all, of course, Joann's going out of business. I found the Buttercup yarn. I actually forgot to bring it down, but I also had picked up the same exact yarn in white. So I just love that K&C Essential Cotton. If you can get your hands on it, I do recommend it as a cotton yarn, especially for a more open project, with lace or something. So I did pick that up in yellow and white. Additionally, I saw my sister over the weekend, and I have been doing this for the past couple years now, where in lieu of Christmas gifts, I gift each of my immediate family members something handmade for their birthday. Now, my sister and my birthday are 5 days apart, and so for her, I just let her know she'll be getting something handmade on her birthday, and then she'll get it later in the year. But I asked her this year what she would want, and she was prepared. She said that she really wanted a short sleeve polo neck knit top. And so when I saw her this weekend, we were in Mount Kisco and I dragged her into Pick Up Every Stitch, which is where Knit Together with Kim and Jana film. And it's a beautiful little yarn shop. They have a lot of knitting for Olive, as well as, of course, other options. I thought we were going to be going the knitting for Olive route, which is why I dragged her in there. And while we were there, I was really happy that they had actually a sample of the Maud tee by Petite Knit. And when my sister saw that, she literally was like, that's exactly what I want, which worked out really, really well. So from there, we figured out what weight of yarn we'd need and the size that we'd probably be knitting for her. And I just said, pick whatever color you want. I recommended that she go for a cotton merino blend because she's not crazy about wool, but I think that a full cotton t-shirt would be too heavy. So the cotton merino blend was a good happy medium for us. And so she picked out this yarn. It's more expensive than I would spend on a t-shirt like this for myself, but more importantly, when I'm gifting a sweater, I want my sister to have something that she really loves. And so this was the color that she really wanted. It's the weight and the fiber that we were looking for. And so I said, fine, I hope you wear this t-shirt a lot. It is all packaged up here still, so I don't want to take it out and mess it up. But this is a yarn totally new to me. It's called Fonty Soyuz. I don't know much about it other than the fact that it's actually a silk wool blend, which even better than the cotton merino. Again, they had a swatch that she was able to touch, and that was just like the ideal way to gift for somebody, because now if she doesn't like the end result fabric or color, I can completely put that blame on my sister and not take it for my own, which is just typical little sister stuff. But this is a really lovely steel blue gray color. It's going to look amazing on my sister, and I'm really excited to try a new yarn. This was a little bit of a pricier one, so I think that these were each $11.50 a ball. And I'm really hoping to have some leftovers. But this should become the Maud tee, and I have to get on that sooner than later so she can have it to wear this summer. So you'll probably actually see that cast on pretty soon. However, disclaimer, if you have a different pattern suggestion that's like that Maud tee that would work for this gauge that you recommend, I'd love to hear it. This would be my first time knitting a petite knit pattern, and I'm not against that. But I also always love to hear of a less popular option. So if you have one, let me know down below. Now, the next acquisition is kind of a funny story. I love to thrift for yarn. It's actually like one of my favorite things to do. I love to pop into a thrift store and find some good yarn there. Now, what a lot of places do, Goodwill, what a lot of Goodwills do is they will put a bunch of yarn into just like a big bag and sell the bag and tape it shut so you can't get inside. And I came across one of these bags at Goodwill, and I'll show it to you, and then I'll tell you why this story was really exciting and then really disappointing. It's so heavy. Oh, okay. Okay, here it is. If it's not easy to tell, this is a massive bag full of cones of yarn. And I was literally like jumping for joy, ecstatic, smiling, giddy, so happy when I found this. I literally came home and forced my fiance to sit while I essentially put on the like millennial fashion show for him, except for it was not new clothes, it was new yarn. And I took the cones out one by one and I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, these colors, I love them so much. There's reds, there's purples, there's greens, pinks, creams, gray, green, all my favorite colors. And each one that I'm pulling out, I'm looking inside the cone to try and figure out a label, where they're from, what are they? And I found one that said acrylic, and I was like, oh, bummer. Bummer, there's an acrylic cone in here. And then I found another one that said acrylic. And then another one that said acrylic. And ultimately, I am 99% sure that every cone of yarn in here is 100% acrylic. And obviously there's nothing wrong with acrylic. I just don't love the knitting experience with it. And so I haven't been knitting most of my sweaters in acrylic, though I have knit with acrylic before. It's just that suddenly I thought that I had scored a bunch of wool cones and instead they were acrylic cones, and I was so upset. Now, I did pay $8 for this bag, so it's obviously not the end of the world, but still, that's $8 I could have put towards a yarn that I actually wanted. I think I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity, though, and stuff a few balls of yarn that I have in my stash that I am just trying to get rid of, and I'll just bring this guy back to Goodwill and let someone else who wants acrylic yarn have their way with it. So by the time you see this, this is probably not going to be here anymore. I might keep one of them just for fun, but I really thought I hit the jackpot, and then I was like, it ruined my day that it was not in fact wool. So that was a sort of acquisition that's not really an acquisition because it's going back. And then I got just the ultimate surprise of a lifetime. Because my all too kind and generous friend Shayla, you know her as the face behind Black Pearl Magic, she had asked if she could send me something, and I was literally blown away with what arrived and I like shed a tear crying. So excited. So let me start with Shayla. She made me this bag. And when I tell you that I literally saw this, it was like, this is everything that I am in a bag. It excited me to no end. This is, I think she said it was the Priestess Pail. I believe that was what it's called, but I'll correct myself on the screen if I'm wrong. And it's just the perfect size little summer project bag. And what I always say about Shayla's bags is that even if the clear vinyl thing is not your aesthetic, there is something to be said about being able to just look at a bag and see your project in there and know that it's in there. And I love that. So I especially love that the back has the clear window. It's just stuffed with tissue paper right now. But I adore this, and I'm just so grateful that she gifted this to me. I'm a lucky girl. I'm so lucky. I love this so much. And then imagine my surprise when I spotted the little goodies on the inside, which are little strawberry progress keepers and little heart needle stitch stoppers. Just the most divine, like, lovely, wonderful surprise ever. And I'm just grateful. I was telling Shayla how my favorite outfit combination lately is a pair of cheetah print jeans with my red ballet flats. And so this bag is just the epitome of all of that. And I'm obsessed. So thank you, Shayla. But then there was more. She said that this was a little engagement congratulations gift. And I'm grateful. Grateful is the word. So also in this little care package was some pink Stellina yarn. This is Passion Knits yarn. It is the colorway Vision of Love. It is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% Stellina. And I don't know what this needs to be. I think it would be a really great scarf or shawl. And I've been wanting one of those lately. So I think that would be so fun. But it's just the perfect like Barbie pink. And then arguably more exciting was this. I don't want to take this out of the package because I like that it's nice and tidy, but what you're looking at is Explorer Knits and Fibers Boo Clay in the colorway Roller Skate Red. And what's so funny is that she actually had messaged me the last podcast kind of went out, and then she had sent this and I hadn't gotten it. And anyway, Last podcast, I was talking about how I now have just kind of this random sweaters quantity of mohair that didn't match the project I had bought it for. And she was like, wait till you see what's coming your way. Here is the mohair. It's the exact same color as the boucle. They're both this orange-red poppy color, and I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am for this. I feel like I need to pick a pattern so carefully because I want to pair these two things together. I don't know what this needs to become yet, but I'm sure that you do. So maybe you can help figure it out. I also think that we need to do a sort of boucle knit along in the not too distant future because it's come to my attention that I'm not the only one who has some boucle in their stash now and they're looking for something to do with it. So let me know if you'd be interested in that for funsies. But thank you, Shayla. As always, I'm just very grateful to call you my friend. Shayla is just the kindest, most generous person ever, and she was one of the first people to warmly welcome me into this community. So I'm incredibly grateful to have met her. And I want to make sure that I mention it. If you guys haven't seen it already, Shayla and her friend Heather actually started a podcast. It's called the Charm City Unicorns. And if you are sick of seeing neutrals in my podcast and everyone else's, then I promise you, you are in for some indulgent color in their podcast. It's a very fun, laid back, chaotic, exciting, and entertaining channel. And I've really enjoyed watching their videos that they've been putting out together. And Shayla's editing has been fantastic. So if you haven't seen that already, please go check it out. I just want to make sure that I tell you about that because she's a good friend and I really enjoyed watching her and I think you would too. So that's everything that I have today. Over the next couple of weeks, I definitely want to finish the Salty Days sweater. I just want to get that done because I can. And like I said, I just feel like I need that easy win. I also will definitely need to start making some progress on the pearl sweater as that has a test knit deadline that is quickly approaching. And I think the other thing I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this week will be that Take Turns tank that I started before. You didn't see it today, but I want to make sure to get that done in time to wear it and also to talk about the yarn a little bit more as we get into these warmer months. And with that, I think that's everything I have to share with you today. As always, if you did enjoy this video, I would very, very much appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, then you're going to be notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can always count on there being a new upload on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, a big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye.